Well, it's my pleasure to talk about our new engineering research center called the Internet of Things for Precision Agriculture, or IoT4Ag. My name is David Arnold from the University of Florida, and I'm part of a 4-site team helping to lead the center. The center is led by Sherry Kagan and the University of Pennsylvania. Sherry's the PI. Catherine Keski at UC Merced, David Capillari at Purdue, and Kevin Turner also at Penn, and myself formed the leadership team and the site directors for the site leads, with Sherry as the main primary PI. So the vision of the IoT4Ag Center is this: is to ensure food, energy, and water security by advancing technology to increase crop production while minimizing the use of energy and water resources and the impact of agricultural practices on the environment. This, of course, is not a new problem. All of you are aware that population continues to grow exponentially, requiring more food production. At the same time, energy and water become scarcer and scarcer. There's also a lot of concern over the use of chemicals to improve the crop production or to mitigate disease or pests. And so we also are acutely aware of the need for sustainability in all types of agricultural production. So the mission of IoT4Ag sounds somewhat familiar, but I'll get to the specific details in a minute that make our center unique. Our mission is to create and translate Internet of Things technologies. These, of course, are the new electrical engineering and computer science, and artificial intelligence, machine learning, sensors, etc., to precision agriculture. And being an engineering research center, we have a mission to train and educate a diverse workforce that will also help address this societal grand challenge. So precision agriculture has been around for a long time. The challenges of precision agriculture are really one of limited amounts of data. So sensor technologies are limited, sometimes non-existent, and they oftentimes suffer from poor spatial, temporal, or lack of composition to monitor the state of a field or a plant or a tree. The data is oftentimes coarse-grained. It's siloed in individual different pieces of equipment or data collection devices that often don't talk to each other. Another key challenge is a practical one. In an environmental, agricultural, rural environment, communication infrastructure, particularly wireless broadband coverage, is either limited or non-existent. So even if you're able to collect large amounts of data to do an IoT4Ag application, there's challenges about how to communicate that data back to a data center for data information processing. With all of this, most of the interventions that are done are somewhat one-size-fits-all. They're oftentimes reactive, over-provisioned, which increase the economic and environmental costs that we're trying to mitigate. So our vision is to transform the future of agriculture. We want a farm to look something more like this, where you have network of integrated sensor technologies that are measuring plant, soil, and environment variables. We can imagine drones, whether they're aerial or ground-based drones, that are mapping and detecting information and collecting information about environmental variables or the health status of the plants or crops. We obviously need lots of network traffic and the ability for large data transfer between all of these sensor collecting devices and some data collection center. So the future, what we want to be able to do is to capture specific microclimate and collect that spatial, temporal, and compositional map that will allow us to really get down at the individual plant or tree level to predict and efficiently control the state of the farm or the production of an individual plant or tree. The time is right. You've heard these ideas before, but the time is right now, due to the exponential growth in information technology, emerging trends and understanding and application of data science, and the reduction of the cost and the ability to scale this out, not just from a research environment, but to truly bring this to a farmer, is really the setting and the backdrop for what we plan to do over the coming decade. Our center spans 4 different sites, and this is intentional because we span different regions of the country. These obviously have different climate, they have different crops, different soil types. And so here at UF in Florida, we have a lot of citrus, fruits, vegetables, peanuts, cotton, and more. Northeast has a large amount of apples, some corn, soybeans. Purdue, of course, being in the heartland, large corn, wheat, soybeans, etc. And California, being in the Central Valley, is a large producer of agricultural crops nationwide. So our goal is to use our regions and to use the agricultural test beds available at our various universities to deploy engineering systems. And these will be fully functioning integrated systems that are using latest breaking technologies from battery technologies, drone technologies, data science, machine learning, etc., combining with a very diverse set of experts, not just from engineering, but from agronomy, plant pathology, agricultural economics, and others, to figure out how to really do this in a deployable, scalable, cost-effective manner. So the vision and the benefit of having a center like ours is really not that any of these individual technologies don't already exist in isolation, but really to bring these together and bring not just the researchers together, but also the end users and industry together, as well as the workforce development that's going to be all required to bring this vision to actual reality. So our test beds in the center, we're focusing on the two most obvious ones. This would be tree crops and row crops. These are the mainstays of the food supply chain, and our hope is to demonstrate integrated system technologies, a full functioning system, which I'll describe in a minute, in these two type of farming, common farming environments. So this is getting into some of the technical detail of what we want to form. What we really view this is a complete closed cycle ecosystem, starting with information and physical variables, environmental variables that need to be detected or measured at the plant or in the field, to communication and power challenges, which we'll talk about, to data science and decision making, and then also things like dashboards. How do you present this information in an understandable and actionable way to a farmer who can then decide whether to water or how much to water or where to apply pesticides or where pesticides may not be needed, and not just specifically about their entire farm, but perhaps down to one block in one corner of one field that's having a trouble area. A big goal is also to get ahead of the curve and not be reactive to problems on the farm, but to be proactive and predictive to detect the onset of a disease or the onset of an environmental factor that could stress or damage the food crop production. So the center is broken down into three thrust areas that I'll talk about on the following slides, but simply put, it's sensing technologies, power and communication technologies, and then data science and decision-making systems technologies. So our team spans 20 plus faculty at 4 different universities across a number of different departments and colleges. So in the agricultural sensor systems, we will have activities in sensors, robotics, plant and environmental science, and plant pathology and plant biology. In the communication and energy systems thrust, we have a lot of focus on edge and backhaul communication protocols. We're also interested in supplying power to individual sensors through energy harvesting or wireless power techniques, as well as providing power to the fleet of drones that will be monitoring and doing the mapping in our integrated farming systems. The third thrust area is the agricultural response system, which is, of course, using sensor fusion, pulling together all the data, applying machine learning algorithms, and making informed decisions and recommendations to the farmer for interventions or crop management practices. So what we try to bring together is a broad team with diverse expertise in agronomy, agricultural engineering, economics, environmental science, and of course engineering and cyber physical systems to tackle this complicated, complex problem. It's also important to note that these teams are not siloed. They're communicating with each other, and we're always envisioning this feedback cycle because the decision systems of what we need, information we need to make a decision, depends on what we can sense and how we can sense and get that data into our decision-making process. And so these teams will work together. We also have a number of supervisory and advisory committees. One is called a Convergent Research Advisory Team or Convergent Research Team, and their job is to help survey all the different technologies and bring together and make the connections across the breadth of the center. So what I hope to do on the next few slides is to show you some of the secret sauce or some of the innovative technology solutions that were proposed as part of the engineering solutions for the IoT4Ag Center. If we have a plant, we are interested in certain things about the plant and certain things about the environment. So some of the targets that need to be studied would be information about the leaf size, the leaf color, nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, detection of disease, water, any other pests, and crop yield and maturity of the fruit on a crop, perhaps. Environmental targets, of course, relate to things in the environment. This could be anything from weather to humidity, wind, or the presence of weeds. So one science question we hope to answer is, how does this complex system of abiotic and biotic variables affect crop yield and crop resilience? And on what timescales and with what spatial resolution do we even need sensing technologies to be able to capture all these variables in a way that allows us to do the informed predictive predictions that we are interested in making? So in the sensing area, what we have is we have a sort of a canonical case here. We have a plant, we want to measure some variables. How it's done right now is with large, fairly expensive devices such as this. These deployable sensor nodes can be put out into the field. Oftentimes they're $1,000 per installation. Many times in a 100-acre plot, you might only have 10 of these sensors. So the data collection is very sparse by today's standards for sure. What we hope to do is to deploy new emerging technologies. So one innovation is something we're calling smart chaff. So imagine you had a biodegradable polymer or paper substrate with integrated optical gratings on it. And these gratings, in a simplest concept, you can imagine this polymer might swell or shrink depending on how moist the soil is. And so if you could interrogate these gratings, simply the expansion or contraction of this polymer by flying a drone over and illuminating that device, you would get a reflected signal, which could give you information about the status of the humidity at that point in space. So the idea is to distribute these biodegradable smart chaff sensors that require no internal power across a plot of land, and then use aerial or ground-based survey to measure and interrogate the response of the variable that you're trying to detect, whether that's moisture, pH, or some other variable. We also have a big interest in zero power or near zero power sensors, underground sensing, on-plant sensing, leaf sensing, and more. The idea here is that we want to make large batch fabricated sensors that are very cheap to manufacture, very cheap to deploy, and very cheap or zero maintenance or cleanup after their sensing functionality is done, which may only be for a week or a season, depending on the application. Another big factor is autonomous fleet operation. So many of you are familiar with already the use of drones and other vehicles to go out and survey, particularly imaging, both visible light and hyperspectral imaging, to measure both under canopy and above canopy information on the crops. So this, of course, requires a lot of advancements in autonomous drone and robotic operation. And what we're striving for is to reduce the number of humans required to go out and map a field. Specifically, we'd like to get to an entirely autonomous operation of a fleet. And so these ideas, of course, are not new. This is data that's already being done by our partners. But there's some practical challenges to this. How are these drones powered? Who's recharging them? Where does that energy come from? So we have ideas to deploy power source stations out in the field. This could be solar powered, wind powered, or supplied energy from power lines, which do exist even in distant rural farming communities. We also are interested in using irrigation as a source of power. So there's obviously plenty of irrigation and pivot irrigation systems, and we can put in small turbines to convert some of that energy to electricity to power sensors or to recharge a drone. We have interest in making advanced batteries that have higher energy density and faster recharging capabilities so that less time is spent in a recharging station and more time can be spent actually doing functional mapping. For data and communication solutions, there's many challenges. There's requirements, as mentioned before, that in agricultural rural areas, there's very poor broadband coverage. So new multi-scale communication capabilities are necessary, including sensor to drone communications, drone to drone, or drone to cloud type of communications. So this involves distributed multi-input, multi-output data networks with distributed backhaul solutions to carry this data back to a centralized location for large-scale data analysis. In the ag intervention thrust, we want to combine, obviously, data-driven models, but also combine with biophysical models. And so you need the coupling of the data plus some knowledge of the physical system you're trying to study, and use those synergistically to not only understand the science of what's happening, but also to, again, do the engineering aspect of making informed decision-making and suggested guidance to the decision maker. So one thing is obviously autonomy for better data. We want to have targeted sensing. So if you map out a large-scale field with perhaps even satellite imagery, You then maybe can zoom in on a specific region or a sub-region with a drone, and then you could go down and detect at even the specific row or plant a specific area of need or concern. And so that could be out helping people decide where to put manpower out in the field to do physical inspection rather than a random sampling type approach where you may miss a hot spot or a potential disease outbreak in one corner of a field. We also want to provide farm scale models to inform decision making. So you can imagine presenting a farmer with a dashboard that looks something like this, where they would have a plot of their field, and maybe this is just simply soil moisture. And so rather than having just 5 or 10 sensors scattered throughout the field, you would have a complete, full, dense map of a specific variable such as soil moisture that the farmer could then understand how to change practice managements. Maybe that's simply watering and irrigation schedules. We want to make the invisible visible. And so many of these variables, things of chemical nature, potassium, NPK variables that are important to plant health and plant growth, of course, are not things that you can visibly easily see. And so we would like to deploy sensors and collect data to make some of the important information, even disease or the presence of infectious bacteria, to inform, again, the decision makers about what actions should be taken. Economics is also a major part of the decision making. Any kind of intervention that is done, of course, requires cost and time. And so any kind of improvement or enhancement that might be afforded by all of this new technology has to be done and considered in light of the cost that it would require to actually bring and deploy in full-scale farming application. And so this is important for socioeconomic adoption of not only the models, but also the physical hardware and equipment that would be required to do this. A big part of the center is also not focused just on research, but the whole ecosystem of making sure that these technologies can actually be brought out and put into practice in society. So one part of this is pre-collegiate education. And so this is just informing the general public or exposing young students to some of these ideas, whether that's exposing urban students to farming or exposing rural students to advanced latest breakthroughs in nanotechnology. We have a number of programs leveraging existing programs at our different institutions, from 4-H to Future Farmers of America, partnerships with museums, and a feature program is an organization called Deaf Kids Code, which is spearheaded by Purdue University, where students who have hearing impairments can learn and leverage their special skills to learn how to code and maybe become interested in computer science and coding at an early age. This is showing some examples here of programming simple robots. In workforce development, of course, we will obviously be educating our undergraduate and graduate students and cross-pollinating information and classes and certificates across our various campuses. Workforce development for us also has a very special place as well. And this is through the development of training materials and education of ag professionals. So agricultural professionals involve everything from crop advisors to consultants, and we expect and anticipate working with the farmers, with the grower associations, and others to help bring knowledge out into the field of what are new practices, what are just a heads up of things to be on the lookout in the coming years or decades ahead. Obviously, this will be done through the various extension offices at our land grant institutions, Purdue, the UC system, and then University of Florida. Our goal is, of course, to bring science-based solutions out into agricultural natural resource industries. We have a big goal and mission to also involve industry, and not just industry, but government and regulatory, and of course, conglomerates or consortiums involved in our ecosystem as well. And so we have a large and very, very vibrant interest from a number of large companies. These could be large system integrators, computing companies, information science, robotics, drone, etc. We have obviously interest from large agricultural companies, companies also telecommunication companies interested in new communication and energy systems. We have transition partners that helps transition technology from university labs out into industry. And then we work with the USDA and also the Department of Agriculture in our respective states to help, again, understand policy changes, implementation challenges, and other things that are required to bring this technology to bear. Our goal is to bring all of these people in to a forum on equal ground where not only can they do research functions and engage with their university partners, but they can help guide the system integration and help identify the most opportune test beds for us to deploy our systems on. We also hope that they will help engage with us and create and maintain a technology roadmap and a technology outlook on these emerging technology solutions. So overall, the IoT4Ag Center will do the following. We hope to deliver IoT technologies for precision agriculture to enable a sustainable food, energy, and water future. If you would like more information, I invite you to look at our website, IoT4Ag.us. And if you want specific more information, please contact me. Again, my name is David Arnold. My email address is darnold@ufl.edu. Thank you.